So I don't have slides. I'm actually just gonna kind of talk about our project. For those of you who don't know, I'm a professor in the law school, and my um, co-author is Paula Francisi, who was not able to join us today, but I think some of you know. Um, so our project is about responding to artificial intelligence, but more specifically, modes of artificial intelligence like ChatGPT and language models that can affect the way that legal education is not only delivered, but also how attorneys ultimately will practice. Um, and we are kind of particularly interested in whether a Catholic law school, because of course we are professors at one, might think about responding to these technologies differently in terms of its pedagogy, its curriculum, and really just its overall approach to legal education. So we, in the course of our year here, have done a couple things, but one of the our first objectives was to get a sense from others in higher education, specifically legal education, both at secular law schools as well as Catholic law schools, how, if at all, they were kind of like thinking about this, because I think it was only last spring or maybe last winter when ChatGPT kind of went mainstream or kind of became more available, I guess, to the everyday user, that people started to ask it legal questions, right? And to see if it could produce responses that were acceptable, if you will. And I think there was even some initial studies that suggested that it was able to answer questions at around a C plus B minus rate, right? Both in your regular law school course as well as even on the bar exam. So we actually did some things. So we talked to a couple of people in the legal education world, right, as well as some outside of it, to just get perspectives on the technology itself, but also about how to respond to it. We also asked ChatGPT two distinct questions. We asked it, how should a law school respond to ChatGPT style technology, and then we added one word, Catholic law school, and got a second response. And it was fascinating because we saw immediately the technology itself differentiated between a Catholic law school versus a secular law school, and introduced themes like an ethical framework for thinking through how to use the technology, human dignity as being foundational to Catholic social teaching. I would say that ChatGPT, that iteration of it had a surface level understanding of the Catholic intellectual tradition or the Catholic social teaching, but it wasn't very deep. But it was distinctive in its output as compared to when we just asked the question about a secular law school. But then what we did is we did a kind of deep dive into the Catholic intellectual tradition as it relates to not only kind of higher forms of education or Newman's idea of a university, but also more specifically Catholic legal education. Okay, so it turns out that Catholic law schools have a pretty interesting history. Like I think Catholic American Catholic higher ed, Catholic law schools were kind of initially created as, I think, institutions of upward mobility for certain populations, and specifically Catholic populations, to kind of professionally advance and hopefully advance socioeconomically. So Catholic law schools, there's no kind of uniform understanding of what a Catholic law school should be. Certainly when they first kind of burst onto the scene in the late 1880s and early 1900s, that was not the case. They're kind of operating in almost like a siloing type situation. You have Notre Dame Law School, Georgetown, they're kind of familiar with one another, but there's no kind of coordination, if you will. It's in the mid 1940s that there's a movement in Catholic legal education. In fact, the founder of Seton Hall Law School was part of this, to try to kind of reconceive what makes Catholic legal education distinctive. And there was kind of not much consensus on that, but I would say that there's kind of some common themes about kind of what's what kind of comprises, if you will, the core of a Catholic law school. And to be clear, there's kind of disputes and disagreement about this. But it seems like most scholars who have written this area kind of solidify around the idea that what makes a Catholic law school distinctive is that it has a distinct intellectual architecture. Okay, and what does that mean? An intellectual architecture that basically is simultaneously connected to the Catholic intellectual tradition, but is also willing to engage, I think, kind of perennial questions relating to human affairs and human flourishing. So, for instance, at a Catholic law school, it would be kind of completely reasonable to ask in a, bread and butter law course, questions relating to values that emanate or exist beyond the law, right? But also to kind of infuse those questions with some understanding of kind of the depth of the intellectual tradition itself. Another author described this as, Catholic law schools are willing to engage the kind of distinctive Catholic anthropology, and he put it this way: the Catholic anthropology holds that human beings are simultaneously dependent, relational, rational, and loved, and all four of those attributes of being a human being are essential for thinking through what Catholic legal education should look like, right, and what it means to kind of train an attorney in that sort of tradition. And this kind of translates into both a focus on intellectual development as well as kind of more formative, non-intellectual to social development, catering to kind of the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and professional sides of being in the Catholic law school. And this, to be clear, is not just kind of the musings of some like random, American Catholic legal scholars in the 1940s and 50s. It also is pretty synergistic with, major church teaching, right? So there's obviously the most famous, I guess you could say, would be kind of JP2's Ex Corde Ecclesiae, right? And his kind of descriptions of higher ed more broadly. But before that, right, you have kind of writings about the purpose of education, whether they're kind of formally issued from magisterium or not, right? And then you have writers like Newman, right, and the idea of a university and kind of it being more than just an intellectual endeavor, but the intellectual endeavor having a uniqueness behind it. So how does this relate to kind of our primary task, right? So I don't want to take too much time, but basically we're kind of still working that out as we speak, but we've decided to structure our essay or our paper in a fashion where we're going to describe not only the kind of onset of artificial intelligence in the legal profession, but then also talk about the Catholic intellectual tradition as it relates to legal education, but then as it relates to emerging technologies. And what we learned in that latter category is that CIT and emerging technologies, a lot of people have written about that. And I think it's fair to say, despite certain moments in history, that the church basically has like these are not my words, but somebody else's words, a kind of a technological optimism approach, but is also always kind of guarded that technology needs to be situated within a broader ethical framework so as to not outsource kind of core human attributes, right? Kind of the Catholic anthropology that I was mentioning before. So at the end of our paper, what we'd like to do is ultimately suggest that CIT can serve really as a light post for thinking through kind of complicated questions relating to pedagogy, curricular implications more broadly, professional ethics in the legal space, and then also thinking about how the technology can be harnessed to be a force for good, both kind of systemically, but also individually, right? So to make that really concrete, in a kind of academic sense, one question you might ask yourself is, well, to what extent should students be permitted to utilize the technology if it's going to do a pretty good job of kind of summarizing the law, right? And then that kind of translates into, well, to what extent are you kind of letting students become kind of dependent on something that would otherwise have been a required portion of their endeavor, of the educational endeavor? And is that kind of struggle worth it, right? The intellectual struggle to kind of grasp things worth it? That's a question that CIT asks, right? I don't think it's a question that all kind of secular approaches ask with respect to technology. It recognizes the power of the efficiency that comes with the technology, but it doesn't make it preeminent. Or for instance, you might say, how does CIT kind of and CST more broadly suggest AI could be utilized to increase access to justice, right, or increase access to legal resources? It seems to me that there's a lot of potentialities there that a Catholic law school could think really seriously about. So that's where we kind of are at the moment. We're thinking through not only the kind of foregrounding of the first principles, right, which I think are things like, the human dignity that the church consistently mentions, right, but then also the real difference, but important difference, but also relationship between, working on your intellect, but also your will, the degree to kind of which legal educational programs can help students cultivate not only their sense of identity, professional identity, but virtue kind of as an ethical attorney. And then also kind of notions or ideas relating to kind of the dignity of work, right, versus a culture of dependence, right? And I think all of those themes are present when it comes to Catholic legal education. And the technology kind of risks some things, but it also kind of potentially comes with some benefits. So that's kind of the basic arc of our project. That's what we've been working on. That's kind of what we've been doing. And we're kind of like now in full-blown writing phase and drafting it out to suggest what we hope will be like a real contribution, because we've seen a lot of literature in the legal space relating to interfacing AI in legal research, or just kind of assuming that it's all good, right? And there much of it is good, but I think this will provide kind of a distinct lens overall. And I think hopefully both at Seton Hall and then maybe at some other Catholic law schools generate some conversations about kind of internal administration, et cetera, for preparing students. So I hope that is sufficient, but that's basically kind of what we've been working on.
That sounds amazingly interesting. I just thought that what you said about the sort of superficiality of it was interesting to me, because we tried that. Somebody tried that in English with getting it to AI to duplicate Dante. And, you really can't, of course. And I was just thinking, with all these things, you need a soul, but I think your project is really valuable. For those of you who came in after the beginning, I think John and Jacob, Mary had a death in the family, so I'm filling in for her. And so please keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and her family. So what I think we should do is just go through the presentations, hold your questions till the end. We want to make sure everybody gets the opportunity to present, and then we can have time to ask questions. We're not a large group, so just if you have a question for Brian, just jot it down if you don't mind, and then after everybody's presented, we can ask questions of whomever we wish. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian, and Paula, who is a part of this as well, in absentia. So who would like to go next?
We can go next now. Jacob's here.
Okay.
I assume was going to the mass, which I didn't get to. Let me just see if my slide's going to work. Not that I have very many. Okay.
We are seeing it.
We are seeing it. That's excellent. All right. So for those who don't know me, I'm Lisa Rose Wiles. I'm in the library. And Jacob Weger, who was my Mission Mentors partner, who's in the wonderful and flourishing environmental studies program, and also the lump of sociology, anthropology, and criminal justice. So what we decided to do was we wanted to organize a faculty seminar on climate change, and it was kind of modeled on the one that Greg Glazoff did a couple of years ago on shame. And we thought not only was it a topic that's really important, globally important, and certainly a hot topic, it's really one that cries out for a multidisciplinary interdisciplinary approach, which is what we wanted to do. And we particularly, because of the Mission Mentors program, who we thank for sponsoring us, by the way, to incorporate insights from theology and the Catholic intellectual tradition, because we thought there was a lot to offer there. So we invited people that we thought would be interested from multiple disciplines across campus, and we ended up with 7 wonderful presenters from diverse disciplines. What we ended up doing, just for logistic reasons and people's busy schedules, was we did this in 3 parts over teams. So we had 2 Thursday and 1 Friday presentations so that that would fit people's schedules. So after Jacob did a wonderful introduction, we kicked off with Father Joe Larissy, who started us off with an opening prayer, and then this great presentation that he did, Catholicism and Care for Creation, where he really walked through, the Catholic understanding of creation, but really foregrounding the Catholic intellectual tradition in our human responsibility to care for God's creation, to care for the earth, and our human duty as meaningful stewards, and also our interconnectedness with all of nature. One point that came out there was this idea that, we are somehow above nature because we are God's special creation. And really, Father Joe put that in perspective, talking about what also came to be a focal point through several presentations of Pope Francis's Laudato Si, and Pope Francis's call for what he called swift and unified global action to care for God's creation, which was a really good way to set up for the subsequent presentations. So the second one on our first presentation was, many of you know, Dr. Marion Glenn, who is retired, but she's still emerita. She's still very active in conservation. She still works with some of our students. And her presentation about restoring a livable climate, first of all, she went over some ways that, we really are destroying the world and the problems of climate change. But then she went forward in a very positive way, taking up this theme of care for creation in often small but practical and meaningful ways that people have done that, helping to recover ecosystems. And she had an international perspective, but one that really struck us was a local one, which I didn't actually know about. It's in Summit, where Marion used to live, and it's a mini forest project where people create a mini forest, very fast growing, on a very small area of reclaimed land. And apparently this one in Summit, there's also an Indigenous medicine garden there, which was spearheaded by one of our former students, Christina Perez, who was a senior then, and inspired in part by Dr. Glenn's presentation. Several students in the environmental studies capstone class are currently researching this tiny forest initiative with help from Ms. Perez and Dr. Glenn. So that's really exciting. That was something, very concrete coming out of this care for creation at a very grassroots level that involved Seton Hall students. I should have said too, speaking of students, we had great attendance at this session. We had 37 attended, which in today's busy world was pretty impressive. And also all of our presenters on top of that were able to attend. And a lot of the attendees were students, which was really good. There was a very lively Q&A session afterwards. I had lots of good questions. And then our second session was on a Friday, and it wasn't so well attended, probably because it was Friday. We had 14, but still most of our presenters on top of that attended. And a bit of a high point there was, I don't know how many of you know Susan Haig. She is actually the conductor of the South Orange Orchestra, but she is also the founder and director of an organization called Civic Story, which puts out a lot of local stories and is very conservation oriented. So that was a bit of a scoop to have her come, and she asked a lot of good questions. So our first presentation that Friday was Jared Best, Climate Change and Eco-Social Work. And this was really interesting. First of all, because a lot of the people who attended didn't really know that social work was so involved in these issues. And also because Jared framed climate change as a social justice issue, really resonating with the themes, as Brian already mentioned, of human dignity and options for the poor and the vulnerable, which is such a critical part of Catholic social teaching. And he used the example of this asthma alley, which I had never heard of. Apparently it's in the Bronx and subjected to terrible climate pollution. And he explained how social works use what he termed ecological systems theory, which works on improving the fit between people and their environment. And they work both at a very individual level and also trying to confront systemic and structural issues such as environmental racism, which was really a big theme of his talk. And now I am going to hand over to my Mission Mentors partner, Jacob. I'll put the next slide up. You are good to go.
Ooh, thank you, Lisa. Actually, can you go back to the last slide? I think we still need to cover.
Oh, I'm
what
sorry.
Tom and Mike.
Oh, I beg your
presented
pardon.
about.
I moved too quickly. I didn't do Mike. I was trying to stop at a halfway point. I beg your pardon.
That's all right. Yeah, well, thank you, though. Thank you for that great introduction here. Yeah. So again, on session number 2, our next presenter was Dr. Thomas Resnick from history, as well as environmental studies. And he gave us a talk on Laudato Si and Catholic social teaching, historical roots, and contemporary growth, showing how Pope Francis constructively applies older themes and principles to the modern ecological crisis, kind of showing the intellectual and theological roots of Laudato Si. And then Dr. Resnick reflected on Pope Francis's message that, quote, we cannot address climate change as individuals or even as individual nation states. We need to come together, walk together, act together, end quote. And further provocatively asks, how can we model this in our own work as faculty and as a university community? So that was very a good provocation to get us to reflect on as educators. And then finally, on session 2, we had Dr. Mike Taylor from political science, who gave us climate change, zoonotic disease, and antimicrobial resistance, addressing wicked global health problems with the One Health approach, in which he emphasized the need for a holistic approach to these various interconnected problems, explaining the CDC's and the United Nations One Health efforts to design and implement research, education, and public policies to achieve better public health outcomes. Really about understanding these challenges as interconnected and mutually reinforcing, and seeking responses and solutions accordingly. Yeah, just a quick other note about Susan Haig being in attendance. One of the things that was so great about her attendance is that she reached out to us afterwards and wanted to offer. We have opportunities for students to get involved with civic story, and that's now an offer on the table for environmental studies students, for example. Civic story as a local journalistic outfit that is so interested in questions of sustainability and conservation, they are always looking for student contributions as well. Then session 3, we had attendance was back up again on November 9th. Again, lots of students in attendance, which is really exciting. And we had 2 full presentations and then a brief wrap up. Our first presentation on November 9th was by Heinrich Hellwig from philosophy. He began the seminar that day with his presentation, The Lynn White Thesis and the Wicked Problem of Climate Legislation. You can see that a number of our presenters were drawing on this idea that climate change is a wicked problem. And in his presentation, he explored how anthropocentrism or human-focused approaches and ecocentric or nature-focused approaches might both be represented in climate change legislation. He did this particularly by looking at the work of Lynn White, a historian who came to believe that the fundamental issue underlying climate change is, quote, people's beliefs and attitudes about the proper relationship to nature, end quote. And that the solution, therefore, to environmental problems must also be religious in nature, bringing us back again to this focus on the Catholic intellectual tradition that was woven throughout these presentations. And then our final presenter was Dr. Judith Stark, also from philosophy, who her presentation brought us back to focus on the students with her presentation, Climate Anxiety, the Perils and the Prospects, which she focused on creative uses of climate anxiety rather than kind of becoming overwhelmed and feeling hopeless. She was stressing the need to give students space to both acknowledge and talk about these feelings of climate anxiety, as well as to recognize the intersectionality of the many factors that are often involved, and to work with others to address climate injustices in our local area as well. So she ended very nicely by providing us some practical suggestions, which dovetailed beautifully with Dr. Glenn's presentation, as well as this recurring theme of how to practically care for creation that Father Laracy introduced at the beginning of our series. We ended our seminar series with a wrap-up by Lisa and I, and a lot of lively Q&A. That was actually really exciting to see. People seemed really really engaged with these talks and were eager to ask questions and discuss, both presenters as well as students and others in attendance. And right now we're currently working on compiling the presentations into proceedings that we're going to publish on the institutional website. I don't think we have a link for that yet, but we'll certainly be sharing that with folks once we do. We'll also include links to the session recordings, which we're going to sort of make available in the institutional repository. So yeah, just to tie this up, we recognized in putting this series together that climate change is, of course, one of the most pressing issues of our time. It's an environmental problem that connects to all spheres of human social life, and it's been recognized as a classically wicked problem, being that it's incredibly complicated challenge to solve, involving numerous interacting parts, different scales, often eluding our efforts to conceptualize it, to predict its long-term impacts, and to coordinate responses in effective ways, arguably threatening the very viability of modern civilization. And yet, climate change is also much more than just a physical environmental phenomenon, and numerous critical scholars have pointed to the fact that this dominant framing of climate change as a purely physical phenomenon tends to elide other ways of thinking about how it relates to our politics and economics, how it might be understood as being driven by sort of misguided cultural values, and the ways in which it affects things like human health, security, and well-being, and intersects with questions of ethics, justice, and human agency. So we really wanted to bring together diverse speakers to address this issue of climate change from multiple disciplinary perspectives, including the philosophical and even theological or spiritual. So a number of scholars have also pointed to the fact that that communities of the faithful might be some of the most well-positioned to mobilize large and globally connected communities to respond to climate crisis, as well as to do so in a way that places ethics and values as front and center. So, questions of justice as well, things that the Catholic intellectual tradition is very well positioned to speak to, certainly. So yeah, we feel like it was a great success. Looking forward to having these proceedings published, and we had so much interest and enthusiasm that we're even hoping we might be able to kind of keep this going as a regular annual seminar series, or at least have some repeats in the future if we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I was thinking about when you were talking about the student volunteers, I was thinking it'd be a wonderful thing for our students in the Corps. So I'll follow up with you guys about that
Good point.
for
Yeah.
service learning. Thanks so much. So who would like to go? I guess who would be next?
We can go next.
Okay. All right.
All right. Let me share
Aline.
screen
Aline?
first. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? PowerPoint. All right. Yes. I'm Dr. Fanli Jha from psychology. This is my 8th year at Seton Hall. And this is Dr. Lee from Department of Sociology, Anthropology, Criminology. I think that's your 4th year?
It's my 2nd year.
2nd year, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to appreciate the Center Faculty Development, right? Because I've been, I'm the first cohort of the mentor-mentee. I was the mentee at 2021, 2022. So Dr. Thurman from communication is my mentor. So we did a wonderful project. We proposed a core 3 class on religion identities, and then the religiosity on and the spirituality on a Mother Seton life story, right? And yeah, so without those the faculty development, like I taught core 2 multiple times. I was on a mission seminar 1, 2. I know there was a 3. I couldn't make it because they go to Rome. And both me, Dr. Lee, and I were in the teaching fellows. And then I just saw there's a new one came out today or a couple of days ago on experiential learning, a fellow. So I'm interested in that too. So you will see my proposal. So without all of those, I don't think the word religion showed up in my research agenda or teaching at all. Because I grew up. I think Dr. Lee, same thing. We grew up in a non-religion cultures, and then now we're at Seton Hall Catholic culture, and then with all those, the foundation or opportunity. So we've been together on this joint project. And yeah, we'll look at public opinions on the U.S. Supreme Court and the policing. So we look at the influence of the religiosity. So I think the most difficult part for this mentioned mentor program is just finding a common, topics. What we interested. I know a lot of all the colleagues doing wonderful work, and just we don't know who's doing what, and then how those things can join together. So from this presentation, I know Jacob doing climate change, environmental stuff. So that's on my research agenda as well. Right. And then Brian doing AI. So we just had an AI academy. So now we know everybody doing what. So the most difficult part is finding those together. And we did have several meetings. So my research was on character development, moral development, pro-social, pro-environmental. And Dr. Lee's research was on criminology, especially on public opinion, trust the government, and the policing. So yeah, after several conversations, we saw let's look at how religious perspective on those 2 sensitive, or using Steven Pinker's word, like a dangerous idea. So that's the way we got together on those topics. And we look at 2 public opinions. So first is we want to see defund the police. So that's the story, and both of them, like confidence in the U.S. court. So both of them came from the tragedies on Floyd, on that the tragedy, and that's a 2020. So from that time, just people show dramatic decline on trust the government. And the police reform, so that topic bring up again to see if we should defund the police and then use that money on public service. Right, and I'm gonna turn Dr. Lee on a couple recent trends to see how the public opinions on those 2 topics.
Thank you, Fanli. Could everybody hear me? I just want to make sure. Yes, that's great. So we look at the recent data here is about the overall confidence in the Supreme Court, the highest court in this land. And very interestingly, and also is a common sense right now, is that public confidence dramatically declining in recent years and reached the lowest point in 2022 here. I would like to direct the groups to seeing the X shape here. And I would like to know, this is only one data to showing us this dramatically declining, and including other major data such as like Gallup poll and public poll also showing this declining. So this is what we see here. The data we're using here is one example. I would like to walk you through here. So if you focus on the purple line, this showing how many people, how many Americans in percentage have a great deal confidence in the Supreme Court. And if you focus on the green line, that shows how many Americans hardly have non-confidence in the Supreme Court. And what we can see dramatically is that before the 2018, all of those lines are actually very stable, right? And how many people have the confidence in the Supreme Court is very stable. We can see this trend actually very stable in the past century, starting from 1973. But starting from 2018, those Americans have a great deal in the Supreme Court, drop from 26 to 18. Now we only have 18% of Americans that have a great deal confidence in the Supreme Court in the democracy land. And if we focus on the green line, we can see here, and we have 36% of Americans, over one third of Americans hardly have any confidence in the Supreme Court. Of course, we can refer to the recent case law, right? We know the very controversial overturn of Roe v. Wade decisions about the abortion legalizations rulings happened after 2018, and also all of those controversial immigration case rulings handed down by the Supreme Court. And those trend actually becomes very stable across demographic groups, including gender, racial, and ethnicity, including social class, including degrees education. I would like to have us to the next slide to just use as an example to see the dramatically declining. If you can see the lowest point here over the 2025, you can see those people hold a college degree actually joined those people have high school degree, showing their low confidence in the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. See, if you see the lowest point we can show here is that 15% of college degree holder and also high school degree holders have a great deal confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court is largely declining if you focus on those people have the college degrees. So this is only an example. Cross the demographic groups will also have the lower confidence in the highest court in this land. Next slide, I would like to show you how about the defund of the police. Again, this is also come from the most recent data, 2021, which surveyed the public opinions after the George Floyd's event happened. And I would like to emphasize this again, like Fan Li emphasized here, how we measure defund the police. We ask people, do you agree, do you support, favor, or oppose? We move the fund for the police to social services. It's not like completely cancel the fund to the police. What Americans see here, you can see those bar chart, almost 60% actually oppose we defund the police, and 40% of Americans, again, still a significant portion of Americans support we defund the police and move the fund for the social services. Now, after we introduce the public opinions on those government institutions, I would like to defer to Dr. Jia to explain how the church attitude or how the people with beliefs and their attitude toward the police and the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Right. So this is the public opinion, and we dig into the literature. We want to find how the church say about this, the defunding the police and the trust in the government. It's surprising we couldn't find any. There's no, so far on our literature search, there's no, directly, seeing the Catholic religion or what toward to those opinions. But does church has to have a say about that? Which is yes. Right. So I look at a couple of Pope Francis encyclical letters. So one of them is the Fratelli Tutti, and I searched the word common good. There are 43 times. I searched the word social justice. There are 63 times. So it just means that this document say a lot about the common good and then the social justice. So I know that the Catholic Church not teaching directly speak to those issues about police reform, right? But it does speak about the need for common good in the social justice. So I really want to copy paste all those 60 quotes, but I select 2 of them, right? So there were people holding important social positions, yet lacking in real concern for common good. Justice is probably solely out of love of justice itself, out of respect for the victims, as a means of preventing new crimes and protecting the common good, not as legit outlet for personal anger. And then another quote I found from Catechism of the Catholic Church, 1992, paragraph 1906, the common good concern the life of all. It calls to the prudence of each, and even more those who exercise the office of authority. So the church does have a strong opinion, right? So either oppose or support on those social justice issues. And we did find a couple, opinion pieces posted on the internet, right? So one of them is from the Black woman's perspective in Catholicism. And she said, many of us are willing to endorse the police reform, but fewer are willing to seriously consider police defunding, right? So it just means that then she supported the latter and just show that there's strongly support. And on the other hand, right, so this is a survey from a Catholic news agency. So they did 1,212 survey who self-identify as a Catholic, and what they find out, they also have many other opinions as well. One of them is just like defunding the police and then trust the local government. So they show overwhelmingly majority of those survey, 82% said they have at least some trust. So it shows that majority do trust on the local police department, especially protect their family. But then if we go down and see only 1/3, so 33% roughly said they support defund the police initiatives. And this is more men than women and more young adult than older to support. So even to show that within the church of a Catholic Church, it show a divergent opinion. So it's not a surprise. Right, and then now we know the public opinion. Now we know, to link the church, common good, social justice, and we do have some personal opinions posted on the news and one survey. So for our project, we want to look at scientific ways. So we want to look at a large data, and then to see if we can find a relationship between religions, different type of religions, and how people believe religion, called religion fundamentalism. And then to those 2 opinions on defunding the police and the trust the government. Right. So I will turn to Dr. Lee to look at to summarize our finding.
Thank you. So like Fan Li said, we did use a large data, which is a national representative data. We use a 2021 General Social Survey, which is come from University of Chicago. As you can see, in the past centuries, they constantly connected American opinions to a tremendous large scope of social science topics. Some of years you can see how the people's attitude toward the pet, right, raising pet as their families. Some years we can see their opinions over the social media, which is a big part of our life, or of AI, right? So this is a very constant collection of American opinions for that. The reason why we use 2021 instead of 2022, so a general social survey, because 2021 has the largest variables cover the religiosity and the religiousness variables, or what we can see in this current slide. Those variables we use to test the religion's influence on the public opinions in the court and the police. You can see on the slides. For the religiosity, so they ask people, so are you fundamentalist, yes or no? And how many times of a prayer in every day? And also attitude toward the religion is, do you believe religion makes the United States better? Agree with this statement or not? And how much confidence they have in the organized religions. In terms of demographic groups, we select two measures. The first is raised as Christian. To ask a respondent, are you raised as a Christian until 16 years old? So we want to see if the family influence as a raised Christians. Self-identified Christians is asking the respondent, are you self-identified as a Christian? Yes or no? So those are variables we tested about their effect on the public opinion in the Supreme Court or the defunding the police. So the findings. Are we interested in the findings, what we find? Those are the publishable findings we present on this slide, and also is a takeaway messages from these presentations. In terms of defund the police, we find out fundamentalists are 53% more likely to support defund the police than non-fundamentalists. And how about the people who believe that the religion makes the US better? They are 26 less likely to support defund the police. I want to add something about people believe that religion makes the US better. I think this is a very significant and very important variables, because no matter how we change the statistical models, these variables always shows significance and high significance, showing at the level of 99% confidence levels. How about the confidence in the Supreme Court? We can see there, fundamentalists are 28% less likely to have confidence in the highest court of this land. But people pray more times a day have the higher level of confidence in the US Supreme Court compared to their counterparts who pray less a day. And people who have confidence in organized religions are as twice as likely to have confidence in the US Supreme Court as people who do not have confidence in the organized religion. In the end, I would like also to thank the Mission Project Award to give us this research grant so I could collaborate with Fan Li for this project. We do not stop here, actually continue the further steps. We involve the students would also present in the Peter Scheim Expo in this week about the data lab. So we also involve the students who receive the support, funding support from the university to present this data project. And we continue to explore what is the religiosity's influence on the public opinion in the governmental institution. Thank you. We are more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful and incredibly interesting. And some of the research was very, very surprising how the dynamics came out in your studies. So I'm sure we have some questions. So let's open it up for any of the presenters. We had three very interesting projects that we heard about. So please jump in, and I hope you've been taking notes as I have, so you can go back and ask even our first presenter about that project if you want. So and whoever would like to ask the first question.
Oh, just a small questions. Do we have 4 presentation or 3 presentation? I saw the schedule showed 4.
Oh, is there 4? I beg your pardon. I'm jumping in to fill in for Mary. So if I'm leaving it, Matthew, are you presenting?
Sorry, my mistake. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay. Maybe there was a change, and I don't think. I mean, John is our guest. We're glad that John is here, but I'm pretty sure John is not presenting. So, Lisa, do you have a question?
Yes, although I also thought there were 4, but I can go back to Mary's original email. Wasn't so much a question as a couple of comments. First, I mean, I totally agree with Fan Li about one of the huge benefits of this program is learning about research that other people are doing. So, I'm in this lucky position of being a librarian and I get to hang out with tons of people and find out what they're doing, but I know that's not normally the case. For instance, I didn't know you were interested in climate change, or we would have invited you to present in our seminar. but maybe we'll get you next time. The other comment, Brian, I think your research is just fascinating. And of course, AI is another enormous topic. And I just wanted to say that Tom Marlowe, who's supposedly retired from math and computer science, but hasn't really, and Father Joe Larissy have also been doing a lot of work on the ethics of AI. And I don't know if maybe you'd be interested in talking to them. Obviously not from a law school perspective, they've been doing it. And I think they're sort of more interested in the techie side of it. But I know the ethical use of AI is something that's of huge interest to them too. So just in the interest of connecting people. So I thought that was great.
Well, thank you. Paul and I actually had a conversation with Father Joe. So we did connect with him, and he was one of the people we talked to here at Seton Hall. And he sent us some resources as well. Although I must confess we have not met the other person you mentioned. So I'll have to make that connection. But thank you again for your feedback.
Thank you, Lisa and Brian. Finally.
Yeah, I didn't know Lisa and Jacob doing climate change. I know Jacob in environmental study. But this is broad, so I don't know exactly what you guys doing. Right, I'm on the board, like class climate, I'm on sustainability, and also have a special issues calling for research on climate change, mental health in psychology. So I don't do that. My research more like environmental behavior and then climate change. So talk about parent-child interactions, and then talk about think about the future generations. So having a kid, this is what I found, like having a child is a major indicator or turning point to think about climate change, because a lot of parents say, oh, what's the climate change? So not my business. But then when they have a child, they want to leave something for the future. So one of them is to think about, so in the next 50 years, they're going to leave in this earth and I'm not going to die. So this is something they must do collaboratively together to help the climate. Right. And then I also have my master student back the time, because as you mentioned, Lynn White thesis about religion and then climate change, right? So my master student wrote a thesis on that, and then empirically to look at the student at Seton Hall, because we're using the data here, how their religiosities, fundamentalism, identity, religion as a quest, as an internal, external, to predict their climate change belief. And we also had the qualitative. So we asked the student to talk about what they did, what they have done in their community, in their church service, and at a school to help the climate. So one piece of data, the quantitative is my master thesis, but the qualitative we haven't looked at all. It has been like for 3-4 years. So if you're interested, we can all group together and then look at those things, because that's the master thesis, and then need to be published someday. Right, and then also Brian, I mentioned the AI Academy. Actually, we just had a meeting yesterday, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I think there's like a school for business, art science, communication. Right, Dr. Lee was on that. Is on that too. So we had a academy grant to talk about a different teaching project, research project, and then the grant project. We just got them a couple weeks ago, and then we're looking for more collaborators and for future how we sustain that program. So yeah, I can send you a couple people's name, and then maybe we can connect in the future.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Right.
Any other questions? I just had a quick question for Fanli and Louis. Your project, the way you divided the groups was interesting, and it wasn't exactly what I necessarily would have expected. Fundamentalists, they were more likely to be for defunding the police, and I wouldn't have expected that. And I don't know if you want to just speak to that. I often fundamentalists are sort of associated with more conservative views, but I think of defunding the police as less conservative. And I just was wondering, and sometimes I think just how people define defunding the police. I think sometimes people who get very nervous about defunding the police, they think it means get rid of the police. They don't realize that it means maybe just like helping areas where police are forced to deal with things that maybe social service agencies would be better able to deal with, like mental health issues and so on. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that. Like when you said fundamentalists, are you talking about what type of fundamentalist? Christian fundamentalists, or how did you define that population?
I can start with answering, and I would like to defer to the group's wisdoms because you are much senior experience, also experienced than me in research. I think this is a very good question, especially we ask what types of fundamentalists we are measuring here. I'm showing the. Slides we're using here. So the question actually is only ask, are you defining yourself as a mentalist or not? Yes or no. It did not give the type. It did not give our type if it's the Christian or Catholic or Jewish or other religion type of fundamentalist. So basically, I would say this measure is not that perfect because they lump together all of the fundamentalists together. If we would be able to refine this measurement in the future, probably we can see the accurate variations in these variables. But unfortunately, this data set only ask this question: so are you identified as a mental fundamentalist or not?
Okay, that's interesting, and it's just something that struck me. I mean, I think I would say most Catholics would not define themselves as fundamentalists because it kind of is a type of in Christianity, at least, kind of like it would be hard to be a Catholic and a fundamentalist. I think at the same time, that's at least my understanding of the term. But it's just something that seemed very interesting to me. Our time is actually up, and I had questions written down for each presentation. So I think maybe we'll have to follow up in further conversations. But these were wonderful. Each one was really, really interesting.